Evening with a Legend is a series of presentations exclusive to legends of the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, giving us an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you. By sharing stories and highlights of the big event, you get a chance to become part of the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing.
Tonight, we have the opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you, sharing in the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing. And as your host, I'm delighted to introduce Adrian Fernandez. In 2007, Adrian made his debut at Le Mans, taking home a second place in a V8-powered LMP2 prototype. This was the first podium for a Mexican driver at the Circuit de la Sarthe since the 1960s. 3 years later, in 2010, Adrian found himself back at Le Mans, this time behind the wheel of Aston Martin's LMP1, finishing 5th in class, 6th overall. Returning for the 80th running of Le Mans in 2012, Adrian and Aston Martin took home a third-place finish in the GTE Pro class, covering 322 laps without failures or problems. And with Adrian's help, the team achieved the fastest lap in their class of 3 minutes 54.928. At that point, Adrian had the distinct honor of driving the Aston Martin to the checkered flag, and on September 12th of 2012, he announced his retirement from racing, thus concluding his relationship with Aston Martin. But that wasn't the end of his involvement in the world of motorsports. And with that, I'm your host, Crew Chief Eric from the Motoring Podcast Network, welcoming everyone to this evening with a legend. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you, Eric?
Great. I'm glad you're here. Let's go back in time a little bit and talk about your road to Le Mans. You started racing in Mexico in 1981 around the age of 15, and you quickly moved up and spent 10 years or so racing stateside in kart and IndyCar, building up your skills and your reputation. So talk us through how that all led you to Le Mans. Was that a goal of yours to race at Le Mans? How was the deal put together?
I started in the 24 Hours of Mexico. That was my first race, 24 Hours of Mexico in a Volkswagen Beetle with my uncles sharing the car. So my whole career went through basically every time I managed to get where I wanted to be, like at certain steps, then, new dreams, new goals came to be able to make it. So first for me was to race Formula One. And at some stage, because I didn't have the age, I started racing at 19 years old. So it was not the right age when I was there in Europe. So then IndyCar was more like the right fit for that. And so I moved to IndyCars in 93, 92, I did Indy Lights. And in IndyCar, I stayed there all the way through until the separation of kart and Tony George. And then I went to IRL, did a 2004 full season. Some of my sponsors, they didn't really want to continue there. So at that point I was just searching to see what else I would do. I still had my own team with my partner, Tom Anderson. So we continued to do the IRL. And at a certain point, we decided to go with Honda to do the sport cars. First with the Grand Am in 2006. And then in 2007, basically, we started this program with the American Le Mans Series with the LMP2. We work on the development of the engine and all that stuff. And basically, that was my introduction to sport cars, to the endurance series and 12 hours of Sebring and 6 hours of the Glen, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really how I got to sport cars in that respect.
So you mentioned that you had raced in Europe earlier in your career, especially when you were doing open wheel and looking to get into Formula One.
Yeah.
Where had you turned laps in Europe?
As soon as I realized that I did everything I could in Mexico, I realized that I was not going to go anywhere if I stay in Mexico. I have achieved everything I wanted to do, and I felt that I was stuck. So really, I wanted to go the road to Formula One, and we had the Grand Prix at the time, but we didn't have Mexican drivers. So I said, this is the perfect opportunity. But there was no help, no sponsorship. I mean, as big as it is now in Mexico, in that time, there was nothing. I was actually the first guy after the Rodriguez and a few guys that tried but didn't make it to the top and consistently stay there. I was the first guy to actually just dig my way through it, try to make it in racing in Europe, but I couldn't get the sponsorship where I couldn't even find $5,000, $10,000 in Europe. I mean, I couldn't. I was working as a mechanic. I was an instructor in Brands Hatch with Jeff Brabham and other good friends. From England, when I didn't find the money to race in Formula 4, I was already committed with a mechanic to do everything. I gave him all my savings. And when the sponsorship was going to give me the other part of it, he said, well, sorry, I cannot help you. I said, now I'm stuck. I'm living in the house of the mechanic that is going to work with me. He's going to do the team for me and everything. And now I have no money. So I asked my dad, what do I do? And also, come back home. What are you doing? You're crazy, blah, blah, blah. So I thought about it and I said, no, I'm not coming home. So I found a job. I found a job in Holland, but I had no money. I went through France and I didn't have the visa. So I had to return. I had no money. I had to sleep 3 nights in the train station before we crossed this time over through Belgium. And at that time, I convinced the driver to keep me in the box, in the trailer. I hid for 4 hours and 2 boxes so I can go through it with no checkups. So I smuggled into there because I didn't want. That's the type of life that I had. And I still made it. So that's what I'm saying. It was just very tough. So at that time in 87, 88, and 89, I really did all the circuits in Europe, especially in England, Silverstone, Truxton, Donington. I mean, you name it, all of them. It was a very good for my career because the experience that I got there, it was just incredible. I mean, it was the best racing. And even though it took me a while because I stayed in the same series for 3 years because I have no money and I was working at the beginning as a mechanic and things like that. But it gave me a lot of experience, which it made the base for me eventually to have the knowledge and things like that to own my own team and do the different things that I did in my racing career. So it was a very, very good decision to go to Europe at the time.
So a lot of drivers that go overseas and go to Europe, they end up cutting their teeth at some of the most famous tracks in the world. You talk about Spa, you talk about Silverstone, Monza, the list goes on and on. But then there's always in the back of their minds, Le Mans or the Nürburgring, but usually Le Mans, because Le Mans is the biggest race in the world. And so for you, when you were there, was that ever a thought that was crossing your mind? Like, one day I want to drive at Le Mans.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like I wanted to drive Monaco. I wanted to drive the Indy 500. I wanted to drive the Daytona, the big races. And Le Mans was one of the big ones. And Pedro Rodriguez won there. And it was a very special race for us in Mexico. We had knowledge about the race. And obviously, Le Mans was like the jewel of the endurance racing. So yes, through my career, I always thought about it, but I never had the chance or the opportunity until I finished my career in IndyCars and just had this great relation with Honda to really start racing prototypes in America with an American Le Mans Series, which was very competitive. I don't know if you remember, we had the Penske's, Porsche Penske's, and, Andretti was there, and eventually Gilles de Ferran was there. And I mean, it was just a very strong and competitive series at the time. So yeah, I mean, I got in love with it, and it's just so special to race those cars at that level because those cars are super fast.
So you put together the deal for your first run at Le Mans in 2007. That was with Team Zytek in the LMP2 car.
Yeah.
What was it like going to Le Mans the first time? What kind of impression did it make on you? And coming from open wheel to endurance, more so than, let's say, ALMS, in a much longer format in a track you'd never seen before.
Yeah.
How different was it to drive that LMP2 car at Le Mans?
Le Mans is my favorite racetrack, and I will say the most challenging because of the high speeds. So I really took my time to prepare myself very well. Firstly, that race that we did in 2007 was all orchestrated by Honda because Honda was looking into doing their own programming in the future in Le Mans. So basically, they took me as a driver and they made a deal with Zytek at the time and for me to race there and for them to get an experience about what was Le Mans all about it. So at the time, we have small simulators, just very basics. We didn't have, the high-tech simulators that you have now, but at least it gave me an idea of where the track was going. And then just as I got there, it's a track that you cannot just drive around. 80% of the track is roads that people just go from town to town. What I did is I took a scooter and I went corner to corner, taking pictures. Because as a race car driver, especially in Le Mans, everything is about references. You have to have a good reference to every turning point and braking point, especially going so fast, like in the Mulsanne Straight. It's at night, you go so fast that stopping into the first chicane, if you miss a little bit your braking point, you blow the chicane. So basically, I went through with the scooter and I started looking at buildings. There is a bar, there is this and that. And, I took photographs of all of this while the test was happening and all that. With all this information that I got, I really, really got very well prepared. And I remember that the Japanese driver Karyuki Kurosawa. He had more experience. He's already raced in Le Mans, so he did a few laps. And then that's the other thing. You don't do many laps before the race because the laps are so long. It's not like you do 20, 40, 30 laps. No. You do maybe 7 laps and the other guys 10 laps. It's just not many laps. So that's why I did my homework in terms of knowing where every breaking point may be, references and all that. So I didn't feel like lost because otherwise it takes you forever to learn the track. And I did my laps and I told the guys, I said, don't put any lap times. Don't show me any lap times. The first time that I went there, I said, don't show me anything. Just let me be just going to go out and I know I'll be fine. I just want to learn it. And I took my time and eventually I was starting better. And then I was quite fast to the point that I qualified the car because I was the fastest of the drivers and we put the car on the pole. So that was very satisfying for me. But like I said, I did the homework and I walked the track. I checked everything so I didn't feel like I was in a no man's land. So that was key.
So how different was the setup of the Le Mans prepared LMP2 car versus the one you were running here in the States?
I mean, the cars are very similar. I mean, this was an open cockpit, the same as I was driving in with a Lola chassis and then eventually the Acura chassis in the American Le Mans series. But the difference between the racetracks in America to Le Mans is that it's so long. So you're going super fast. There is corners of 5 gears, 6 gears. I mean, the entry of the Porsche corners and all that section is extremely fast to the point that if you make a little mistake, I mean, it's over. It's not like there's nothing like a little mistake. It's almost like the Indy 500, a little mistake, you're on the wall. It's the same there. So you have to have a lot of respect for the track. It's all about speed. So it feels different in that respect because you're going so fast. Nothing compares all the race tracks that we race in here. Sebring is super slow compared to Le Mans full tracks, but it's just different setups, techniques, everything. For example, Sebring is super bumpy. One year we won it, Luis Diaz and myself, just 2 drivers. I drove 6 hours and a half of total for the 12 hours and I was absolutely done. I mean, just because of the vibration and the bumps and everything. In Le Mans, it's the other way around. It's extremely super smooth, the track. And the nice thing about Le Mans is that the tire keeps the grip lap after lap after lap. So it's really a pleasure and it's very enjoyable to drive Le Mans because the tires, then they don't really dip. They stay very consistent and it was just fantastic to drive. So it's just another technique, but it's beautiful.
And I know I keep bringing up LMP2 cars and LMP2 cars because actually you're the first legend to be on Evening with a Legend that's campaigned an LMP2 car. And oftentimes it's one of those classes that we overlook. It is extremely competitive even to this day, but people view it like a spec class and it's like, it's LMP2. I'm more interested in the LMP1 prototypes or what's going on in production car. And even TV coverage doesn't often give enough light on the LMP2 class. So it's fun to sort of pull these threads and learn from a driver what LMP2 is really like. I've heard from some other drivers coming from open wheel to prototypes, not necessarily LMP2.
Yeah.
They're like apples and oranges. There's no translation between the two. And I often wondered, is that really true? How close is the downforce? Are they very similar handling wise? Or did you have to relearn as you transition from one to the other?
Firstly, you have to relearn because you're not the only driver in the car. You're sharing the car with somebody else. So basically everything is a compromise from the seating position to the setup. So basically you have to really work with your teammates to be able to get the best setup and the best feeling for everybody, because it doesn't matter if I'm very quick and my teammate is not that quick because he doesn't fit well or he doesn't like what we make to the car. It just doesn't matter. So it's a compromise. The LMP2 that we drove in those years that I competed in the American Le Mans series with Acura, those cars were extremely fast. I mean, super fast, because after that, they tuned down the engines. But 2007, 8, and 9, the cars were extremely fast. In that respect, the car performance and speed on through the corners was in some ways very close to IndyCars. So really the things that you needed to work a lot, like I say, working with your teammates, working in a compromise setup that it works for everybody, learning how to manage the car, not destroy the car. Obviously, these days, even in my days, you can push 10-10 all the time, the car, they survive either 12 hours, 24 hours. It's a go. But at the same time, it's a long race. So you don't want to do stupid mistakes and you just really want to have a little reserve just to make sure you don't make any mistakes. And you drive through the night. Sometimes you drive through the night in rain and things like that you don't have in IndyCars. IndyCars, you always have lights. The races are very short compared to Le Mans. I remember one year, 2010, with the LMP1, I was driving with my good friend Stefan Muka and Harold Primat. And Harold Primat had a problem through the night and he couldn't drive after 1 hour. And I just came out of the car. I was just getting ready. You have your motorhome, you take a shower, you have your physiotherapist, you eat, you do all the things. And I was starting to get ready to go to sleep. And the team called me that they had an issue with him and that if I would be able to replace him. He had an issue with cramping and things like that. So I jumped in the car. I didn't rest much. 3.5 hours after I came out of the car, and I drove almost 4 hours straight. And I say almost 4 hours because it was like 3 hours and 55 minutes, because you cannot exceed, in those days, you couldn't exceed more than 4 hours. Otherwise, you get a penalty. But I was fine. I could drive. I was not sweating. I remember that thing that I did so long. Actually, the engineers and everybody went to sleep in the middle in the trucks. I was not hearing anybody. It was completely dark. There's not even lights. The only part that there's some lights is in the permanent course, but the rest is just absolutely night. So you just see your lights of the dash and the lights of the other cars, but it's so peaceful and you're just basically, it's like diving at night, just so beautiful. But I was calling my engineer and nobody was answering, like for 2-3 laps. I was getting worried, even though I knew exactly more or less when I had to get into the pits, but sometimes it gets a little scary if you don't hear back from your team.
Glad you brought us into 2010 and the LMP1 attempt with Aston Martin. And so I wanted to focus in on something you just said. We've heard from other drivers about the changing conditions at Le Mans. What are the most stressful times when the sun is starting to come back up or when it inevitably starts to rain? But almost 4 hours in the car. A lot of drivers these days don't do those long stints like that. They do 2 hours at a time and, then they have the maximum amount of drive time and all those kinds of things. How do you stay focused for 4 hours in the middle of the night when you're just by yourself? How do you not, let's just say, get bored? Or how do you keep your pace consistent lap after lap for 4 hours?
Just training. I have always been a very disciplined person, very disciplined athlete. Even in my days of IndyCars, I always worked to the maximum and more. I was very good with everything I did, and the type of training physically that I used to do, it was also about concentration and focusing and things like that. So for me, it was just natural. I felt I was very good at it. Barely made any mistakes. I've never crashed in Le Mans. So I was just very pure concentration. And to the point that, like I said, I can drive for 4 hours and I didn't have any problems with getting tired. Because in IndyCars, one of the challenges that I face when I enter IndyCars is that I have a very small bone frame. My bones are tiny compared to, for example, people in those days like Mario Andretti, Nigel Mansell, Paul Tracy, Zanardi, etc. So the IndyCars in those days were so physical that you needed 4 or 5 laps to do a good lap in qualifying. And the 4th or 5th lap were the best. And I couldn't do more than 3 laps good. And so the extra, which was in the 4th or 5th lap, my body was completely done physically. I just couldn't turn the steering wheel. We have no assistance of anything. We have no traction controls. We have no power steering control. And we have 1,000 horsepower. Those cars were really a beast. I mean, you have physically... I remember Ari Leyendijk and I, before the start of the Laguna Seca race, we were, instead of talking about the car or whatever, we were talking about, are we going to make it, physically, because it was so physical. So I learned a technique to relax. Obviously, I changed the way I work out and everything, less cardio, more weights and things like that. But then I work a lot on relaxing my muscles through the straights. A technique that I learned and I applied very successful. Work with my engineer because we have this deficit. So how are we going to make it? So physically you have to work on this. So I learned how to relax my muscles on the straight and just put the effort on the, so some people are like very tense, even in the straight. No, in the straight I was just relaxed, just basically putting the minimum amount of effort just to keep the car on the line. And then when you get to the corners and all that, that's when you put the effort. So that really takes a lot of effort out of each lap. And that's how I managed to improve because of the strength that I was lacking. And then because we were not qualifying so good, John Ward and myself, we work on just how we're going to fight with this deficit. So basically we work a lot on how to save fuel. And if you remember in my days of IndyCars, we were the first one that we were so good on saving fuel. So I always managed to do 1 lap or 2 laps more than the guys when they came into the pits. And that was how we compensate the lack of strength in those days with IndyCars to be able to win races. That transferred to Le Mans So same with Le Mans. Some guys who, when they come and, the speed and everything, they are very tense and they get tired more and all that. And I was extremely relaxed on the straight. You have such a long straight. So I was very relaxed driving the car in that respect, putting minimum effort into my muscles and just focusing on the track. But you're going so fast, but you have to relax. And once you put everything in contest, everything slows down in your mind. It's like a machine, lap after lap after lap. And the only thing you have to worry is about somebody went off, there's gravel, or there's certain things that normally when there's a driver change, you have to be ready like half an hour before you get into your shift to getting back into the car. And at that time, you put your earplugs, your radio, and you start talking to the driver that is driving the car. And he's telling you the last 3 laps or 2 laps or the last lap, he tells you, no, be careful in here, be careful in there. There's a little bit of oil, or the track is okay, don't worry. Because you have to perform. Once you get out of the pits, even if it's 3, 4 in the morning, a little chilly and all that, and you're like sleepy or whatever. I mean, you have to jump on the car and you have to go, and you have to be within 3, 4 tenths or the same lap times that the other guy was. I mean, so you have to be really on it because the competition is so strong. But it helps to listen to the driver that is coming out to see how is the track, how is the car, any problems, blah, blah, blah. And that's the big difference when you were asking about IndyCars and sport cars, the endurance. Competition is just that you're sharing the car with somebody else. So you're a team in that respect that you normally don't do that in IndyCar. That's a lot of fun and it's very challenging.
So let's catch everybody up. 2007, you come home with a second place finish in LMP2, your first time at Le Mans.
Yeah.
With all the preparation that you did, it paid off. I'm sure you couldn't have been more happy with those results.
Yes.
You come back in 2010, running an LMP1 car for a totally different team, totally different car, and you come in 5th, 6th overall.
6th overall. We finished 5th in class, and it was with Harold Preman and Stefan Muke, and we finished 5th in class, yes.
Another year goes by, the 2011 season comes around, and I didn't mention this in the introduction because your luck sort of ran out at Le Mans that year, and you had some problems with the LMP1 Aston Martin AMR1. So what happened?
David Richard wanted to do his own engine, his whole thing. And the way they designed the car, especially the engine, they run out of time to produce a good engine. And basically, they were having so many problems. Both cars retiring within. We did 1 lap just after the Dunlop corner, in the Molson Straight, just 200 meters into the Molson Straight. Basically, I broke first, and then Darren Turner was driving the other one. And he broke 100 meters ahead of me, and that was it. 1 lap in a quarter, that's what we did. That was very hard on Aston Martin in David Richard, and it was just a tough day for the whole team.
But that didn't stop you.
No.
Another attempt in 2012 at Le Mans. So how did that work? How did you move then into the GT production class, again running for Aston Martin? Why the invite to go into production and not maybe another LMP2 or LMP1?
So this is what happened. At the end of 2009, Luis Diaz and myself, we won the LMP2 championship in the American Le Mans Series. At the same time was the end of my team, Fernandez Racing. I closed the doors of Fernandez Racing. And the reason was we had the crisis of 2008. And we did very good with Fernandez Racing. I wanted to keep the team, but it was very difficult to keep sponsors and a lot of things. At that point, I've done everything in my career. I was very successful in most of the championships and cars that I competed. So I was in a good position myself. And for me, the most important part of my life at that point was to put a lot of attention on my family. That was like as much attention and dedication I put to my racing career. I wanted to put that into my family. I was just burned out. I was living in Miami. I didn't want to go and live in Indianapolis or somewhere else. And I mean, I had different opportunities, but I was done. Basically, we decided to sell the team. And Lowe's USA helped me to get this deal with Aston Martin. They sponsor us. They paid for my salary. And the deal was for 3 years. So basically, I was going to drive whatever David Richard wanted me to drive there and whoever he would put me to drive with. Because at that time, I was not an owner driver. I was just a driver. So basically, he wanted first the LMP1 was the first time 2010 with him. Then 2011 was his project. It was a LMP1 also, but it was just a total disaster. And actually that year, we have to jump back to the other car that we had, to the LMP1, the beautiful, I don't know if you ever heard it, but the Aston Martin, they call it B0960, which was the Lola chassis, beautiful chassis with this V12. Aston Martin was beautiful sounding, beautiful. So in 2011, we went back. After we saw that the AMR1 was not working, we went back to the Lola chassis and we finished the season. So for 2012, David said no more LMP1 or LMP2. Obviously, Aston Martin makes a lot of cars, especially, just the Vantage GT and all those. So they had always a program there. So, but basically they wanted to have the top drivers driving in the pro team. Basically, that was my year that I just did GT, which I never done before in my life. I did a few NASCAR races in Mexico and things like that. And I did a few races on the ovals when I tried to go to NASCAR in 2005, 6, 7. And it was challenging, to be honest. Driving the GT was the most challenging because I was driving with Darren Turner and Stefan Muka. These guys were extremely good drivers in GTs. When you come from cars like the LMP1, LMP2, and driving all your life single-seaters, Indy cars, things like that, type of driving is just very precise, very small movements, etc. When you jump in a GT, the car moves a lot more. You have to get used to that movement and trust in the car and things like that. So I really had to work really, really, really hard on it, but I managed to have a great season with them. I worked really hard on looking at how the car felt and everything. And I was always within 2/10 of them. So it was a great season and basically a great finish for my career in terms of racing, because that was my last race and we finished third.
When you follow the WEC and even the IMSA schedule, not all of the races do the quote unquote, the bigger cars like the LMP2s and LMP1s run the whole season with the GT cars. It's a little bit different when you've got all the classes running together, like at Rolex or at the Glen and places like that. So when you got to Le Mans running the GT, even though you had been running it in the rest of the season, I've heard a lot of other drivers say that when they took a step into a production class, they spent a lot more time driving in their mirrors than they were used to.
Yeah. That's the horrible part of it. I remember very well because, I took my dad there because I really thought that was going to be my last race. So he was with me there. So we started driving, and in practice, I did race some at night, and I was extremely uncomfortable, especially, I was 50 years old. My eyes are not as good as when I was 35. And I was struggling at night. The most difficult part of it, first the lights, you get these lights and obviously your marks are not as good. And now they have better systems so you don't get blinded. But you see the lights and you think that he's there and you want to turn, that part of it that you are not secure if he's there or he's not there is very difficult, especially in those years. Now they have much better system to know if they turn, if the other guy is there or not. So it was just very, very difficult in that respect. So what I told my guys, Stefan Muka and Darren Turner at night, I said, how old are you? As 20 something, and you 31 or 32. Okay, good. See you in the morning. I'm not driving at night. I took the right decision of not driving at night. They did all the work. They did a fantastic work, fantastic drivers. And I drove in the morning and David Richard let me finish the race, cross the finish line. And that was very special.
A lot of drivers that tell their Le Mans story, it's a turning point for them as a driver. And for you, it was towards the end of your career, actually at the end of your career, as you decided to retire after the 2012 season and move on to other things, still involved in motorsports, which we'll get to. But everybody tends to agree that Le Mans changed them as a driver for the good, sometimes maybe for the bad, but generally for the good. So how would you say that Le Mans changed you, or what did you walk away from the experience with? What did Le Mans teach you as a driver?
To be even more disciplined, because any small mistakes, like the Indy 500 is a tough race, but it's just 3.5 hours, maybe max. But Le Mans is 24 hours. You're driving with different classes, different speeds. So basically, it just teaches you a lot about awareness and respect the other classes, respect the other drivers, and be more disciplined within yourself every time you make any decision when you're driving. And that's why Le Mans, it makes you a better driver in all aspects.
As you retired from racing, but you didn't retire from motorsport, you got involved with Sergio Perez in Formula One and trying to promote the next generation of Mexican drivers coming up through the system. And so you've been involved in motorsport for your entire life. When you look back over your career, working with Sergio, working with a lot of other drivers, do you have any advice for aspiring Latino drivers who want to make a career in professional racing?
Yes, of course. I mean, the main thing is that if you really want to become a professional race car driver and make an impact, you have to really take it with all your arms. I mean, you have to be completely involved on it, 10-10 all the time, because it just takes so much. The competition is so tough. There's so many good drivers. So you have to always look at how can I be better than the other guys? And there's so many good drivers around, that the difference between the good drivers and not so good is very small. It's just the good drivers, exceptional drivers are the drivers that can stay in that limit for a long time and they don't make mistakes. They can adapt to different type of cars. If the car is not good or bad, they can adapt. And they can go through adversity and things like that and still be there and make the results. And that's what it takes. And to do that, your life has to be balanced, meaning you have to have time just to think about racing. If you have other businesses, other distractions, family or a lot of family or other distractions, it's difficult. I mean, look at Max Verstappen. He finished one race and even sometimes in the weekend of the Grand Prix, he's racing online, with the simulators. And after the races, he's racing on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday with the simulator. He's so sharp mentally because he's on it all the time. And that's how the level of competition it is. So if you really want to do this, you have to really put everything on it. You have to be very selfish because you have to really dedicate a lot of your time to it. And sometimes, I miss a lot of weddings and special events for my family. I have to leave Mexico. I have pursued my dreams, and that takes a lot of sacrifices. And a lot of people don't do it 100% and they do it 98%, 97% or like that. And sometimes that 2-3% makes the difference between the good drivers and the exceptional drivers.
Do you know of any pathways for younger drivers to come up through the system? Is it easier now? Are there any incentives for Latin Americans and Mexicans to come into the US and European racing programs?
I have not been so attached to racing. I mean, I watch the races because I like to race. I watch the IndyCar races. I watch Formula One and I watch some NASCAR races because my good friend Daniel Suarez is there. But for Mexican and for a lot of the Latin drivers, the doors now are open. When I went to Europe, the doors were shut and I had to open them because there were no opportunities to have sponsorship. Nobody believed that you can make it. Now it is proven. So now the work is that you have to go and knock at the doors of the sponsorship and convince them that this is what you want to do. And they tell you no, it feels bad, but you have to keep knocking at more doors. And because now it's easier to really make it in terms of make it to different categories. Like I tried to do it, it's easier, but I will probably say it's more difficult to make it to the top in terms of Formula One because there are so many drivers now. They all know the techniques and all that because it's all out there. In my days, you have to walk the track. There was no simulator. You have to find yourself out. Now, all the information is out there. So that's what I'm saying. So it's in the old days, the difference between an exceptional driver and a good driver was bigger because of the knowledge that we didn't have. Now, because they have everything, they have all the tools. Now, the small details on your commitment to racing, that's what makes the difference.
So let's say non-drivers, enthusiasts, somebody walks up to you, Adrian, and says, "Hey, I heard you drove at Le Mans. I've never watched an endurance race before. Why should I watch such a long race?"
American Le Mans Series, endurance racing is not easy to watch. You just have to be very passionate about it because there's too many drivers, too many classes. But when I race sport cars, all those times, the fans were really knowledgeable about the drivers and the brands, everything. It was like a big family. And same with Le Mans, you have so much history there. If you like cars and you start reading about all the stories about Le Mans and the Porsches and Ferrari versus Ford, etc., etc., and then you get there and you see the atmosphere, the place. It's overwhelming. It's just beautiful. But obviously you have to like racing. And these days, the young generations have 3 kids. The span of attention is very, is very short. They want things very quickly. And that's why like NASCAR, to watch a NASCAR race now is just more difficult. In the old days, remember, you have all the red kicks, everybody watching the races, stay there. I race in those era. I race against Dale Earnhardt Sr., Jr., all those legends. And it was all the people were there because racing was in their blood. So now we just have to educate the new generations and like what is happening with Formula One because of COVID and Netflix. And they did this documentary on the racing. People got hooked because of the personality of the drivers and everything. And the same with me when my career became a boom in the 90s. It was because people knew about the drivers. We have very good television coverage and everything, and people really got really hooked into it. It was very special. So now it's the same. It's just, we just have to educate the public in terms of endurance racing, what's it all about, make small stories and all that. So yeah, but I mean, as a driver, for me, it's just one of the best. And I put Le Mans as my favorite racetrack in my entire career, by far.
One of the things you touched on there was seeing a lot of change over the years and over your many years in the motorsports world, in your professional career, and then afterwards, you've seen a lot of change. What do you think is one of the best things to have happened to motorsport in your time in its involvement, or one of the best things that's ever happened to Le Mans? You came after the course redesign and the building changes, so you didn't get to see all the stuff in the 80s, but there's a lot out there. So what do you think is one of the best things that's happened?
Yeah, I say safety, definitely. I mean, I was one of the first drivers to test the HANS device. It felt weird. It felt like, really, we have to use this? But the safety aspect of it is just incredible. And then the halo, but all these things. I had also a terrible accident. I don't know if you remember, but in Michigan, and one of my wheels came out and went into the public, and it was just horrible. And after my accident, the fences went up on the track and more in, and they start putting tethers in the uprights to attach the tires to it. So that was a big improvement in terms of safety, the halo, and many, many, many other things. So I'd say the aspect of safety, not just on the cars, but the tracks, has made it much better. Since I started driving to when I finished driving, I lost 14 friends that they're actually in practice, in testing, or in racing. So that's a lot of drivers. My career was a span of 32 years, but losing 14 friends, that's a lot. That's way too many. So yeah, I say safety is the main thing. Obviously, the track has improved a lot. Le Mans, for example, my last race, with the GT, and the following year, I forgot his name, from Denmark, I think was his name, got killed in Petrol Rush. Just little things, because it was the real, and they had a tree on the back and things like that. So I'll say the safety is the main point. Obviously, the cars are becoming also a little less physical, but more integrating in terms of your steering wheel, which in the old days, we didn't have that many things on the steering wheel. We have them in different areas. So it's more there. So basically, you just have to train your mind, your brain, to work with this little steering wheel where you have everything. In our days, we didn't have anything. I remember I used to say to my engineers, the less buttons you have in my steering wheel, the better. I don't want distraction, because it was already physically very, very hard. And, I just bought a BRM from Pedro Rodriguez, 1970, and the car is difficult to drive. It's I drove it in the last year in the Monaco Grand Prix Historics. That's when you realize how racing was so much more, for the driver, more difficult, more challenging, especially physically, because the position wasn't the right one. They didn't have the right steering wheels. The pedal position was not right. The cars were not that strong. They were very dangerous, etc., etc. So when people start comparing drivers from different generations, eras, I always say, you cannot compare. You cannot compare. You cannot put me a modern Formula One driver and put it in the cars that we used to drive, or other areas, or the Fangio eras, where if you have an off, you most likely are going to get killed or get burned, because the cars were like that. So when for example, in a corner that you take flat out in Formula One these days, if you don't make it, you go in a off lane. It's all paved, no worries, offline, off limits, like they call it these days. Our off limits was the wall, the trees, the grass, the rocks, the fence, whatever. So in that respect, everything has changed a lot and has improved, which is good. In some ways, it's good. In some other ways, I think they have taken it a little bit too far, especially with these 4 wheels out of the line and all that. I think that's so stupid. I think they should put natural limits on tracks. And if you want to go out there, well, there's no grip, or you're going to go into the wall. It's still, with the safety protocols that they have these days, they can still do that. But obviously, always there is a compromise for all this.
Well, I'm glad you brought up driving historic cars, because as we wrap up here, one of the final questions I want to ask you is, if you could go back to Le Mans today, all things being equal, and drive maybe a car from 2023 or the 2024 season, what would it be? Or, because this year we have the opportunity that we're running the Le Mans Classic for the first time in many, many years, would you go back to Le Mans and drive one of your previous cars or one of your competitors' cars?
I think I would love to have driven the GT40. the GT40 that Pedro Rodriguez drove, and typical, the ages when they were fighting with Ferrari and all that. The GT is just a beautiful car. I'm actually trying to get one because I would like to drive it actually in Le Mans, in the Le Mans Classics, with the old cars. But that's the car that I would love. It's just a beautiful car. Another car that I like is the 917, from Steve McQueen those days. That's another car that I love. It's another beautiful car. But I think I like better the GT40. Just imagine in those days, they didn't have chicanes and they were flat out. And if you jump in these cars, if you see the 917 in the front, it's just little tubes. There is nothing in front of your pedal to protect you if you hit the wall. I mean, you're going to be the car is going to be like this. It's just incredible that in those days through Le Mans and all that, what they did and the speeds they were doing in those days in these cars is incredible. I mean, that's Molson Straight took forever. I mean, probably some guys smoke a cigarette in those days.
To paraphrase something I heard Derek Bell once say, driving the 917 was like being strapped to a lawn chair that could do 200 miles an hour.
Yeah. I mean, I know him well, and we talk about it. And, I drove a lot of the cars that were very unsafe, and sort of like when I started my career. But it's incredible that in those days, you don't think about it. Even the track that I used to drive, you see some of the pictures of my early days, and you see people there, whatever. That was how racing was, and you just didn't think about it. It was like, okay, well, if you hit him and kill him, well, that's part of the sport, right? Sublime to think that, now we're thinking, now it's so scrutinized, everything, safety, drivers, everything, uniforms, fire, this, that. In those days, I mean, even the seatbelts and so many things, they were not so safe as they are now.
What's next? Is there more to this story? Are you done with motorsport?
No, you know what? I have learned to close the circles. I live a beautiful life now. I have 3 beautiful kids. I have a beautiful wife. I have a 16-year-old boy, a 17-year-old girl, Valentina Nico, and then I have a 4-year-old Adrian Jr. And like I said, I sacrificed so much, and I was very selfish, where I didn't have other life but racing. I was so into it and so perfectionist in everything I did that I miss a lot of those things. So now I just love my life because I'm just Adrian Fernandez. I'm not the race car driver. I go out, I can be myself. If they don't recognize me, the better. I can do the things that I didn't do for so many years, and I absolutely love it because I had a fantastic career. I'm here. I'm still in one piece. I did a lot of good friends. I own my own team. I competed in different series. I won in most of them. I made my money doing racing, which not many people do that, right? Everything I have, I made it from racing. And also my career teach me a lot of other things. So I'm in another thing, investments, and I've done very well. But it's my own schedule. I don't like schedules anymore. I don't fancy that. They invite me to the Mexican Grand Prix or to these. I don't fancy that anymore. I spend so much time. I was an FIA steward also in Formula One, apart from being a manager of Checo Perez. And I mean, those are the worst jobs because, you're not looking after yourself. You're looking after somebody and they don't hear you all the time. So that's not very nice. A lot of people want me to manage them. I don't do that anymore. I help them. I give them advice. And I say, I help you for free. One day, if you become big, just invite me to one of the races to be with you. And we have a nice dinner and that's it. That's your thank you. And I'll be happy. But I don't have to get involved. I don't have to go through the headaches. I already have them, because racing is tough, especially that I was the driver. I was the owner. I sold the sponsorship. I never had a manager. So I did everything myself and I did it very well, but I was extremely exhausted. So now this balance of life that I have here where I am, I have a beautiful museum here in Miami with some of my race cars, memorabilia, and I work here. We have great partners with other collections of cars. It just cannot get better. Some people, sometimes they don't let it go, and they want to stay attached. I see it with a lot of people, drivers, and they keep driving. You see, I mean, I drove 32 years, so what else am I going to prove? It's a Le Mans, like I do Monaco, that's for fun. I don't care if I win or if I'm bad, last. I don't care. I mean, what am I going to prove? I don't have to prove anything. I'm done. And that circle in my life is closed. It's just the best part. A lot of people who cannot do that, then they start getting a lot of problems with themselves because they want to be that light. They want to be in the spotlight and they want to be there. It's just, I don't care if I'm in the spotlight. I don't care if they learn that. They recognize me. In the 90s, I was big. I was there. That's fine. I enjoy it. But that circle is closed. Now I do other things and I enjoy it a lot.
Have your kids expressed any interest in going into motorsport, or is that just part of dad's past?
No, I took Nico because he's 2 years younger than Sebastian Montoya. Juan Pablo Montoya is a good friend of mine. They used to live here in Miami. We were neighbors. The kids went to the same school. So when Sebas was starting to drive go-karts and all that, I took Nico a few times with him and all that, but he really didn't like it that much. He enjoyed it, but like if I invite you to a ride in a fairground or something like that, but nothing special. He never asked me again and I didn't. So he has been playing soccer since then and he's a fantastic soccer player, which I love it because I also do different things. And sometimes I think about it. Do I want to spend the rest of my life going to the tracks again and the weekends and all that? It's just too much. Now I live in other things. I do other things. And it's just so your life is full in terms of experiences and everything. When you do everything the same, that's why I don't do podcasts or anything like this, because if I speak the truth, most of the time it's going to be in trouble. And now these days with social media that you have to be political correct and all that, I mean, it's all that bullshit. I don't want to get into that. I don't need it. I don't live from that. It's just a great balance in my life at this moment. And I enjoy a lot of what I did. I had a fantastic 31 years. It was just a wonderful journey. And, I'm just glad that I'm still here because I lost a lot of good friends that I love and that I like. I'm very blessed to be able to be here with good health and enjoy my family and do the things I like to do.
As we wrap out here, I'd like to pass the torch to David Lowe, president of the ACO USA, for some parting thoughts.
Adrian, on behalf of the ACO and the U.S. members, I just want to thank you for an incredible evening.
Thank you.
It was about Le Mans, but it started to sound like a TED Talk, which is a big compliment. You touched on a lot of points that people don't touch on in our evenings, and you brought a different flavor to it. And I really appreciate that. And I say that on behalf of the members. I personally thought it was an incredible evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. Anytime. And thank you, Eric.
And on behalf of everyone here and those listening at home, thank you, Adrian, for sharing your stories with us. Since 1981, when Adrian entered his first auto race, the 24 Hours of Mexico in Mexico City at the age of 15, he made racing a permanent part of his life. In the 90s, he would enjoy many successes behind the wheel of an IndyCar, along with his 4 attempts at Le Mans from 2007 to 2012, propelling him to even higher heights, becoming the manager for another up-and-coming Mexican driver, Formula One's Sergio Perez. With over 30 years of professional racing under his helmet, Adrian is a model for many of us to continue to aspire to. To learn more or to keep up with Adrian's latest adventures, be sure to follow him on social at AdrianF007 on Twitter and Instagram. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and look forward to more Evening with a Legend throughout the season. And with that, Adrian, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing your stories with us. And whether you realize it or not, you continue to be a role model for up-and-coming drivers from here on out.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Eric. Stay well, my friend. Good luck.
Ciao.
Ciao.
This episode has been brought to you by the Automobile Club of the West and the ACO USA. From the awe-inspiring speed demons that have graced the track to the courageous drivers who have pushed the limits of endurance, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is an automotive spectacle like no other. For over a century, the 24 Hours Le Mans has urged manufacturers to innovate for the benefit of future motorists, and it's a celebration of the relentless pursuit of speed and excellence in the world of motorsports. To learn more about or to become a member of the ACO USA, look no further than www.lemans.org. Click on English in the upper right corner, and then click on the ACO Members tab for club offers. Once you've become a member, you can follow all the action on the Facebook group ACO USA Members Club and become part of the legend with future Evening with the Legend meetups. This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.